I'll never lie to you.
I would answer.
I'm going to tell it. I'm sitting here with some of the guys, George, and at the park. And I thought earlier I was going to
These are all my friends,
I was
you know.
going
I've
to teach John
known these
Samuel
Well,
a
I
little
didn't
bit.
know her that long.
But my
I
friend
know,
Larry.
I didn't know him that long.
I told him
known
if he
him
wants, he can
forever.
tell the story,
I've
but
known him
I don't know if he wants to tell it.
And I've known you forever.
That's Larry. One of the homeless
I
guys,
am the
I
boss.
won't mention his name, but about a month
No,
ago,
I am the block.
he walked up to my
I know.
friend Larry.
I believe
Now,
it.
this other guy I'm telling you about was homeless himself. And Larry's been homeless for a while. He's trying to get on his feet. And the other homeless guy gave my friend $100. $100.
You gotta be.
Well, I gotta be after all these
Larry
years.
was with him
I
in
think in
McDonald's or
5
Whataburger
years, 3 years.
about a month later. They were just sitting down in Whataburger.
15 years.
And some guy that they do not know walked up to my friend Larry and the other
I know
guy.
you were in the end.
His name is John.
Not for the bluff.
And he gave
You're welcome.
John a $100 bill. And my friend Larry said, God paid him back because he gave me a... No, it's all right, it's all right.
M68-1,
Okay,
M68-3, M48,
And Larry's talking to me about it. And
What do you think
he's
about
sharing
that,
some
mister?
other stories. How God's blessed him, God's been good to him. And they got a lot of, stuff they go through. But
Well, no, the M1
they recognize
now
when
is
God
dead.
blesses them. Now I'm going to tell this story about a dream I
I'm
had.
going to use this for...
And I was waiting to tell it.
You want this?
But I had this dream
Jumbo? It is a hydrogen.
that I died. And at my funeral, I was like above the casket. And I could see my friends coming. And I'm like, oh, look, there's Joe. There's Albert. There's Crow. There's George. And I'm watching in the dream. And then I noticed there's like a scuffle at the casket. And, sometimes when a friend dies, people, they take it hard and they want to like wake them up or get them out of the casket. But I saw in the dream that George was like reaching into the casket. And the ushers came up and said, no, he's gone. Take him back. And George said, no, I was looking to see if he had that dollar for the day. I'm kidding, George. I was waiting. I thought of that today, actually. The guys wanted to give me money today. I was kidding George. I said, lend me 10. He was going to lend me 10. I said, no, I'm kidding you. The guys are trying to give me money today, my friend. I said, no, I don't want to take money. I don't want you guys to give me money. Everybody goes through stuff, but they help each other out. They support each other. Now I'm going to walk over there and teach a little bit, I think, on Samuel. George, you want to say something?
God bless everything.
I haven't seen Claire or Crow. As a matter of fact, I didn't see them at Timmons, and I
They ain't
haven't.
been out here in about a week.
Okay, so Claire's now watching the videos because she's a Facebook friend now.
Yeah.
So hi, Claire and Crow, if you get to watch that. All right, I'm going to walk over there and look at this. All the guys here, and I think I'll do a little update on Samuel. I was thinking the other day, I'm just reading some of the chapters, and I'm not teaching 2 Samuel, as a whole study. But let me comment on this chapter, which is 2 Samuel chapter 16. David, and those that were following the story of David that I've been talking about, but David has a rebellion in his kingdom, and it comes from his own son, Absalom. So David, I mentioned on one of the other videos, it's one of the beautiful pictures of Christ, because King David is actually going up the Mount Olivet, which is the same place where we see Jesus and his men in the Gospels. And David's in a time of trial and difficulty. And in chapter 16, David at this point, once again in his life, he's on the run. The whole story of King David, how he came to the throne. He was being pursued by King Saul, and he has to seek God, and he's trying to do what is right, and he's trying not to take vengeance. And then God honored David, and David ascended to the throne. Well, sure enough, at this stage, you would think, oh, good, I finally arrived, at the ministry or whatever particular goal you have in life. And you would think, now I'm in the rest years, the years of retirement. Larry, he's just recently, my friend I was talking about, just recently got Social Security, but legitimately because he turned 62, I guess about a year ago. But still, it's not enough for him to really get off the street. And he's got a little place right now he's just trying to work on. But you think in the life of David at this stage, he would think, okay, I'm going to have some easy sailing. But he doesn't. And so David's son, Absalom, is now gone back to Jerusalem. He's dispossessed David. David's left. And David has some men with him. And in chapter 16, there's a few interesting points, 2 Samuel. As David is on the run, and there's a lot of problems going on, there was a servant by the name of Ziba. Ziba was a servant in the house of King Saul. And when King Saul was killed and David ascended to the throne, one day David called Ziba, and he's settling all the orders of his kingdom. And David says to Ziba, okay, you have charge of all of King Saul's riches and all the inheritance and everything that Saul had. You still have everything going there? And Ziba says, yes. And David says to this man Ziba, he says, there is a grandson of King Saul. There's a surviving family member of the dynasty of Saul, and his name is Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth, and that was the lame or crippled son of Jonathan. Jonathan, who was the son of King Saul. The surviving heir, if you will, to the throne of Saul. And David said to this man Ziba, I want Mephibosheth, I want you to honor him. You're going to take care of all the goods and all the inheritance that came from Saul. You're still going to run that, but you're going to be under Mephibosheth. I'm going to honor my friend Jonathan, who was the son of Saul, and I'm going to honor him by putting his crippled son, Mephibosheth, over everything. And you, Ziba, are going to still be the servant. Now, David made that decision back before this chapter. And we don't read that Ziba responded like, are you kidding me? I thought you were going to give me everything. He never says that, but you kind of read into the story that maybe Ziba felt that way. Like, I don't want to really be serving this crippled grandson of the king who's dead. But that was the decision he made. Okay, now in this chapter, now that David's on the run, this man Ziba comes to David with a couple of donkeys and a bunch of provision. And David is he's in disorientation right now. He's having difficulty. And David says to Ziba, why are you here? Why did you leave Jerusalem? And Ziba says, and then David asks him, what about Mephibosheth, who, you're supposed to be in charge of everything there? And Ziba responds and says, I'm here to help you, David. I'm going to be with you. And Mephibosheth, when he heard that your son, Absalom, took over and kicked you out, Mephibosheth said, and these are the words of Ziba, he said, Mephibosheth said, oh, great, now that David's going to be gone, I'll finally be the rightful heir to the throne of Saul, and I'm going to be restored, and I'm going to be the next king. David believes this man Ziba. We don't know whether or not Ziba's telling the truth. We're going to read later on. If I don't do the chapter, I forget which one it's in. But later on, David gets restored back to the kingdom again. But Mephibosheth's going to deny that he ever said this. And we don't know for sure who's telling the truth here. Ziba or Mephibosheth. More than likely, Ziba here is probably lying. He's probably enjoining himself to David. And David's in, remember, a state of flux right now. One of the philosophers that I taught, I wouldn't even guess, Heraclitus, but there was a philosopher that said there's one thing that's constant, and that is everything is always in motion. That's the one constant, that things are going to change. So David believes this man Ziba, and he says to Ziba, okay, I now put all of that in, it's your ownership, Ziba. I now am going to take all of the stuff that was from the former household of Saul, all that you've been taking care of with Mephibosheth as the main heir, but I'm going to go ahead and give this to you, Ziba. And Ziba says, okay, thank you, great, I humbly accept. Okay, I want you to see something out of that little point. When leadership is in difficulty, people with ulterior motives can spot that. Okay? People that maybe want to enjoy themselves, get something out of it. And when leadership, and in this instance, he's going through so much, he might have fell for the bait. And it wasn't David's fault that that decision was made. But you'll find people that don't always have pure motives, okay? You'll find people that'll say stuff just because they know, oh, here's my chance to get in. Now, David in chapter 16 of 2 Samuel continues on this journey, and there's a man that comes out who was from the family of Saul, from the extended family of Saul, not direct heir like Mephibosheth would be. And he begins cursing David, and he's throwing rocks at David. And he understands all that's happening to David at this stage. And this man says, see, you bloody man, David, you rebelled against the rightful leader, Saul. You rebelled against authority. And all this is happening to you now because you're reaping what you sowed. And it's interesting because this man who's cursing David, he's misreading everything. This man that's cursing David believes that David did wrong when King David came to the throne. But this man, like many others in Israel at the time, they didn't know everything behind the scenes. They didn't know that David, I think the guys are arguing, this happens every now and then. Behind the scenes, there was many reasons that David came to the throne that was God's purpose for him. And what David's going through right now in his difficulty is for other reasons. But oftentimes when you go through struggles in your life, there'll be people that will misread what's happening. They'll say, oh, this is why this is happening to so-and-so, this is why. And that's why it's so important not to judge motives. Because we have no idea why maybe some other church or some other pastor or whatever, some ministry, you have no idea. Many years ago, I'm not going to say the name of this famous preacher, but many years ago, as I watched various TV preachers over years, there was one in particular that when I first watched him, he was not real flashy, and many of you, if I mention the name, probably wouldn't even know him. But he was on some of the religious channels, and just a few times I heard him, I said, oh, he's more, in-depth, valuable. And then they had a tremendous scandal, a huge scandal. And the entire church and everything broke up. But after all that happened, over time, a few times I looked, maybe what do they have left? He passed away, church broke up. But I still remember the good things I heard from that man. Most other people, I would assume, okay, I'm not going to judge the motives, most probably would not even attempt maybe to see or hear him, some of his past teaching or preaching. But I remembered there were good things that he had spoken and he had said. But because of the scandal that happened, he's gone now. He's off the scene. And this man that's cursing King David in this chapter, he's telling David, he's saying, you're reaping everything. You're reaping your rebellion against Saul, you bloody man. And one of David's servants, because he has some men with him, one of his warriors, says, why do we let this guy, this dog, curse you? He says, let me go over now and just take off his head. He said, we'll deal with this. We got problems, David, but this will be a quick one. I'll just take his head off. And David's in such distress. He says, oh, you sons of Zeruiah. Because that was one of the sons of Zeruiah, I guess. He says, look what's happening. We ain't going to solve this side problem by taking this guy's head off. He says, my own son is in rebellion against me, Absalom. We have such weightier issues we're dealing with. If God has ordained it for this other guy who has no idea what's going on, if God has ordained it for him to curse me, so be it. Maybe God will look upon my affliction and bless me for it. So they let the guy go on cursing and stomping. Now, an interesting thing at the end of this particular chapter, 2 Samuel 16. In the midst of all this, David also still, remember, he's a king. He has been effective in leadership before. And don't underestimate people that have already had some experience in how to do battle. Because there might come a time where they get restored and then you'll regret having underestimated. And in the case of David, what he does, in the midst of all this difficulty, these people cursing him, his son mounting a rebellion, David has this particular friend of his, I think it's Hushai, something like that. And Hushai, it's this man that David says, I want you to go back to the city of Jerusalem with my son Absalom in charge. I want you to endear yourself. David's sending this friend back as a spy. And he says, what I want you to do is go back, and there's a particular counselor by the name of Ahithophel. And Ahithophel is wise. It says when the people sought counsel from this man, it was like the counsel of God. And this Ahithophel counselor is actually working in the rebellion against David, and he's an advisor to Absalom, the son of David, who has taken over in this rebellion. And David says to Hushai, one of our main problems is going to be Ahithophel's wisdom, you see. So what we need to do is counteract it. And he sends Hushai back, and he says, what you're going to do is whenever Ahithophel gives my rebellious son Absalom any advice, you're going to thwart that advice. You're going to endear yourself in such a way that you're going to secretly say, no, what Ahithophel says is not good, let's do what Hushai says. And so David's made this scheme, this plan, in the midst of all else that's going on. And in leadership, and in churches and ministries, and all these types of things, there might be times of transition, because David says he doesn't know at this stage whether he's even going to go back and be restored to his original position as the king. He does not know. He says, but yet he's putting out feeder lines. He's doing more. There's a verse in the Old Testament that says, cast your bread upon the waters, because in many days it will come back. Give a portion here and a portion there. And sometimes when you're still maybe in indecision, like, well, which route should I take? You still have a couple of lines out. And you'll know which one to take when you begin. It'll get clearer as you continue on the journey. And then as it gets clearer, then you pull some of those other lines in, if you will. Say, okay, this is the route. This is the road I'm going to take. And so I find it interesting that David still had the capacity to make that plan, to send this one person back. And what's going to happen in the story, I'll maybe comment more on it. But of course, David is going to get restored. But it wasn't by accident, okay? Because he made strategic moves in order to restore, which is going to happen down the road. There's a few comments I can make. I've been reading the Gospels as well, but I wanted to cover that. I thought that chapter was interesting. When this associate of David, Hushai, does go back, Ahithophel and Absalom actually are going to ask him and say, look, you're one of David's men. What are you doing here? And he's going to lie. He's going to say, no, I'm going to go with you. You're the winning team. I'm jumping ships. I heard a joke the other day. And people that are in ministry don't get the joke. Others should too. But there was this man on a desert island. It was deserted. Sort of like Castaway, the movie with Tom Hanks. And he was out there for like 25 years, on some island. Nobody with him. And when he finally gets rescued, they're like, oh, thank God that this ship came by and rescued me. But they noticed on the island that he built 3 houses or 3 structures. And they asked him, what are these? Where did these come from? He says, well, I built them. And of course, now remember, he's out there by himself. And they said, well, what is this house for, this structure? He said, that's where I live. And they said, well, what is this structure for? He said, that's my church. They said, what's this other structure? He said, that's a church I used to go to. So even he by himself managed to have a church split and to build another church on the island. Leadership goes through a lot of things. And in the Gospels, I could comment on it. I've been reading through, but the wisdom of Jesus, there's a lot of good things. Let me just give you one. When Jesus said in one of the chapters I recently mentioned, he said, I sent wise men and prophets and scribes. He's talking to Israel naturally. And he says, you rejected them. But I want you to see, the scripture says, a threefold cord is not easily broken. Those 3 elements, you have prophetic preaching, which is social justice, which is not just regular wise men. You have issue preaching that matter, issues of injustice. Okay? Prophets. That's what the prophets really did. Then you have wise men. And wise men can be associated with apostles. Okay? That's how you can associate them. So you're going to have wisdom. We're talking about that in a second. And then you're going to have scribes. These are 3 that Jesus mentioned that God sent to Israel. Prophets, wise men, scribes. And scribes are people who wrote things down. And just one of the keys of effective ministry, I'll just throw this out, this would be like a leadership post. It's good for you to preach inspirationally, meaning off the cuff. Today I'm doing that. There was no plan. I was thinking maybe earlier I was going to stop and make some comments. But then it happened here. That's good to do. But then you're going to have to do some teaching. I mean, if you want to be effective. Regular, didactic teaching. Verse by verse, chapter by chapter. Just teach. Because the prophetic, inspirational preaching is good. And that's what you mostly see in a lot of, like, Sunday sermon type things. But then have an element where people are regularly taught. Okay? And scribes, write. It's difficult to write. It takes more work to write. It's a lot easier, in my case, to just talk like this. But write. And if you get those things, that's like a 3-fold cord. The scripture says 3-fold cords are not easily broken. And get that in some way. I would suggest have that in some way part of your ministry, through websites, through whatever. And of course, most churches are doing these to some degree, but focus on building that, okay? Focus on building that, because that'll be a legacy where people, a lot of good Christian websites, because I look sometimes on various ones, not just from this area, but a lot of them I notice maybe is geared towards just inviting people to an event or whatever, which is fine. But I'll look, and some have a whole section that's just teaching, and actually it's pretty good. Like you can, but that's in the minority. Most will have maybe a sermon available, like you can go back and watch online. So I would just suggest that makes it a lot more effective. Because Jesus didn't just send, God didn't just send wise men and prophets, but there were scribes. And that's really why I'm able to talk on Isaiah, not because scribes copied and wrote and put things down. All right, so I think I went 25 minutes. I would have had Larry share that story. And he's told me a few others. And so, but today he said, isn't that something, John? One of the homeless guys, I remember when that happened because Larry told me that when it happened a few months ago. He said one of the homeless guys walked up to Larry and gave him a $100 bill or $100. And which is, he said, God told me to give this to you. They're both Christians, these guys. And then Larry was sitting with him in one of these restaurants just a few weeks ago, and some guy they did not know walked in and said God told him to give that other guy 100, the guy who gave my friend the 100. So God paid him back. God paid the one homeless guy back for giving the other homeless guy a $100. And Larry was just excited about it, just telling that story. I don't think he wanted to really, he was a little shy to, I think I showed you his face though, that was Larry, okay? So let me bless you guys. I'm going to go sit with my friends again. And I'll add the verses, and this is 2 Samuel 16, and go back through the study I did on Samuel. This could go along with that. Let me pray for you guys as I walk back. Father, I pray you bless all of the people that watch the videos. Bless my friends here that I'm with today. Thank you for the works that you're doing in their lives. And they recognize that, and they see that. That one homeless Christian guy would give $100 to another homeless Christian guy. And then he would get paid back by some other guy that didn't know either of them. And to them, that was a sign. And so I pray you bless all my friends, that they would also see stuff like that. That they'd be willing to be out in the fields. Get out of the city and dwell in the fields. There's a verse. And I will be with you, and I will deliver you from the hands of the enemy. Amen. Larry, I'm almost done. I'm going to shut it off. You want to say?
I don't know what extent you were doing it.
Oh, no, I did a whole teaching. You want to end? I'm still on video. You want to say something at the end?
Did you speak what I said?
Yes, I told the whole story.
That's so cool.
Yes, I told the whole story.
God bless you.
Yes, and then I did 2
God
Samuel.
bless you.
Yes, that's what.
He'll